It's time again for the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast with Dr. John Dentico. The mission of our podcast is to provide 21st century leadership training for a talent-driven world. We help organizations implement strategies and practices designed to attract, hire, engage, and retain top talent while mitigating the effects of burnout. Our guests are experts in various fields of organizational dynamics, including, but not limited to, leadership, management, communication, and coaching. They bring a world of knowledge and solutions to our viewers and listeners. I am sincerely grateful for their participation and ideas. So let's dive in. And if you enjoy our podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. We genuinely appreciate your support. Hello again and welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Dr. John Dentico. With me today is Marie-Claire Ross, a speaker, facilitator, and leadership coach at Trustology. She focuses on improving trust between leaders and teams in order to improve employee engagement, loyalty, and customer satisfaction. Marie-Claire works with small and medium and large enterprises around the world. She is also the author of Trusted to Thrive: How Leaders Create Connected and Accountable Teams and Transform Your Safety Communication. Marie-Claire has recently been named Thinkers 360 Top 50 Business-to-Business Thought Leaders and Influencers You Should Work With in 2024 by APAC, and is a graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors and a fellow of the CEO Institute. And I am truly pleased to have her here today as we transverse the world in order to bring you this podcast. Hello, Marie-Claire. How are you today?
Hello, John. Good. Wonderful to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you. Always great to have again. I found that this podcast, oddly enough, I never expected it to happen this way, has reached around the world, oddly enough, UK, Germany, India, Australia, New Zealand. It's really wonderful. I have to say, I'm very glad to have you. So let me start off, as I like to say, I'll jump right in. And so let me ask you this question. What inspired you to write Trusted to Thrive?
Oh, that's a good question. So I actually wrote it during the pandemic. I'm from Melbourne, Australia. So I was still in lockdown when this was in 2021. And I was having a lot of conversations with leaders who were really concerned about how to build trust and to build thriving cultures when everyone was working remotely. And it was a constant theme. So I decided to put a book together that would really help bring all those beautiful human characteristics that we do when we're together, but give people the tools and techniques to be able to do it either face-to-face or online, but in one sort of smooth little package just to help leaders when things are uncertain.
Oh, great. Great. I have to tell you my trust story because I call it having trust thrust onto you. Okay. My first real, I mentioned to you before we started, after I graduated from college, was as an officer in the United States Navy. And the one thing I learned very quickly was that you never wanted to lie to anybody, whether it was an enlisted person, a senior enlisted person, or especially to officers. You never wanted to lie, because if you lied, no matter how bad the situation might be, or no matter how bad the report might be to seniors, you would never be trusted. Okay, it would just go right out the door. So isn't something I, in a sense, had a choice. It was either live this way or don't live this way. The choice is yours. So I found in that, and I'd love to get your reflection on this. And when I speak about trust, and I speak about it often in the presentations that I do and in the podcasts, I see trust as a byproduct, if you will, a byproduct of engaging others in actions. For example, I'll give you an example. If you said to me, John, send me that report that you cited in your book, and I sent that report to you, we would have built a little trust. The action, you can now trust me a little bit because I, in fact, completed the assignment, if you will, that you sent to me. I'd love to get your reflection on this idea of trust as a byproduct of taking actions with other people.
It's interesting because how I define trust is that it's the ability to confidently rely on and predict, because prediction is really important, that the other person is going to do the right thing and make good on their promises. So they're not, you know that they're not going to hurt you or let you down. But of course, trust is very circumstantial. So it all depends on context, and everyone is different. So it's a small word, but it's a very complicated topic. But in terms of how you're tying it to the ability to deliver, isn't it? That's what you're saying. I would actually go a little bit further with that. We usually make trust very binary. It's like either you have to earn it, or I have to earn it or give it, one or the other. And when we earn it, we're looking out at the world, we're expecting people to do things that make us trust them. Circumstances is fair enough. Other times we want to give it, we'll just give trust to everyone, make everyone like us, we'll make everyone trust us. But what the research has really shown is that it's not really either of those. It's actually, trust is shared at its highest point, and the best way to express it, it's reciprocal. And there's some really wonderful research by Dr. Paul Zak that shows that when people feel that someone trusts them, then they do more good things, and you create all this goodwill and you get all this virtuous cycle happening. So I believe that we are both, as human beings in any relationship, each side is needing to build trust. So we really need to come together and work out what we expect and what we want people to do for that to happen. And they need to be able to ask what they need from us. So your example in the army, it was very one way. It was you having to do all these things. And sometimes that's fair, but sometimes as we evolve as human beings and really work towards creating more enjoyable workplaces, shared trust is something that we really need to be talking about explicitly from the start of any working relationship.
I agree. Sometimes you see trust listed as a trait. I don't believe it's a trait. I believe it's a value, and values are shared as far as my interpretation is concerned. So I absolutely agree with you that it's really about sharing trust. In fact, when I talk about trust, a lot of times we see trust as a two-way street. For example, is the leader trusted? And does the leader trust the people? That's normally the way you see it. I've moved to this other place called mutual trust. And what that means to me is if you have a group of 10 people, it's also important for the people in the group to trust one another.
Yeah.
So that it's shared in a much bigger way.
Yeah.
Because when you lose trust in one person, let's say, in that group, it drags everybody else down. It becomes a problem whereby it has a systemic effect on the rest of the people in that group or organization. I'd love to get your reflection on that.
Yeah, it's very true. Teams that are high in trust, everyone is intentional and conscious about building trust with one another. And that is all led by the leader. And you're probably aware of the big study that Google did many years ago about high performing teams, Project Aristotle, where they would bring in some amazing engineers and some PhDs and some extroverts and just throw them all together and go, wow, we've got a high performing team. But what they found was it doesn't matter who is on the team. What matters is how they interact. And it's really led and modeled by the leader, bringing people together and running meetings in a way that brings people together to everyone shares, listens, challenges one another, really helps people to be the best version of themselves.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So
I agree. I wanted to ask you this. Your book speaks to an integrated trust building system And you speak about trust as a practical matter. I agree. I think it's practical. In fact, I think trust and trust building may be the most practical of all practices. Can you provide me and my listeners and viewers an overview of the integrated trust building system?
Yeah, so if we look at the neuroscience behind trust, there are actually three factors that the brain needs to trust in a situation. So the first one is psychological safety. You can say psychological safety, but it's also physical safety, because as human beings, we need to know that we are going to be physically safe as well. We're not going to die at work. So these are all subconsciously. So the brain is asking questions like, am I safe to be with these people? If I take risks, are they going to be there for me if things go, pear-shaped? So safety is really important. The second factor is connection. Now, connection is quite multifaceted. So it does include that sense of belonging, because, of course, that's very important for us as human beings. But what I found in my research was that connection is also people understanding how everything works together in an organization. So it's how the people, the parts, the projects, the priorities, all those things work together. And so this is really to do with leaders really making it very clear as to the contribution a person makes within the organization and how it impacts everyone around them, including customers and other teams and people in their teams. And this is really quite key, because this is where we help people understand how their personal contribution helps everyone else, and that gives people meaning in their work. One of the things I unpack are all the different ways we need to convey meaning in work, because that helps inspire people and keep people going. But a lot of leaders don't leverage that really important facet of leadership. And then underlying that, so you can understand that if you have safety and you have connection, they work together, because if you don't feel safe, you're not going to connect with others and vice versa. But underlying both of those is what I call stepping into a meaningful future. So that's about helping people see that their work, their effort is going to be worth it, because there is some beautiful vision that you're working towards, which can be very uplifting. And people can see that there are career development paths available to them. They can see that they want to work with those people. So it really answers those questions that their brain is asking subconsciously. What's my future with this company? Because particularly what's really interesting, what I found in my research was that people were they love seeing a vision, they love seeing the future of where the company is going, but they want to know that there are plans to back it up and rigorous thinking for that to actually happen. Because at some level, we are wondering, is this company going to survive? If the economy goes belly up and sales stop, will I still have a job? So these three factors all work together, and they catalyze to what I call it's trust, which is the beating heart of every team. And then there are intersections within that, how we do accountability and how we have our meetings and our one-on-ones, and how visible we are as a leader and how visible we make what everyone else is doing as a leader. This system, it's almost like if you consider being the captain of a spaceship, and you need one of the people to go out, the astronauts, to go outside of the ship and do a spacewalk and an experiment. To do that safely, they have to be tethered to the inside of the ship so they don't fly away. And of course, they can feel safe, they feel connected to everyone. They know they're going to have a future because they're not going to disappear into the blue yonder. But what this does is that as human beings, we need to know that we have autonomy and that people care about us and that they're looking after our well-being and that people want us around. And when we do that, it can be so powerful for our team.
I couldn't agree with you more. I feel like I've been in a Vulcan mind meld with you. It's really, really great. I'll tell you, I had a previous podcast guest named Nikal Raval. And Nikal lives in India. He spent 14 years in America working with some big companies, Charles Schwab's, went back to India, and along the way wrote a book about working with Gen Z. And he gave me one of the best lines I've ever heard, because for the past 30 years, I've talked about meaning, how important meaning is. And he said, John, meaning is the new money. If you can somehow provide opportunities for people to gain meaning from the things that they do, just as you say, it's the ultimate, in a sense, approval. It's the ultimate goal for most people. In 1997, I was very moved after I read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And it changed my life. I absolutely. And when Frankl talks about how we gain meaning, do something, the relationships we keep, and making the best of a bad situation, suffer nobly, as he called it. And of course, his reflections on Auschwitz, his time in Auschwitz, why these men survived. How did that happen? So I believe that meaning is really the ultimate goal. I believe it to be the single greatest motivation force on the planet. So I absolutely agree with you. And I think you've mentioned this to me in listening to previous podcasts. My leadership model is based on one premise: contribution. It's all about contribution. We have a problem, we have an issue, let's open the door and let's bring people in and see if we can find a solution. Now, if you saw the model, it can sometimes be confusing because I have a pictorial of it. But number one in the model is safety. It's got to be. People have got to feel safe, that they can say what's on their mind, that they can say what they really need to say. And if you don't provide that as the foundational piece, don't expect anything else, because they're going to be reared back. If I say this, they may find a way, a retribution against me. I don't know. So I absolutely agree with you there. Any reflection on that?
Oh, with the safety thing, and this has come up through research, not my own. And what I love about safety is what they're finding is that it's really about creating an environment of intellectual honesty. And so that is where we have everyone in our team able to not only speak up about things in a respectful way, but to also be willing to be proven wrong. And so when you have everyone who's just willing to just talk about an issue and not have their ego in the way, and just be able to really talk about something and throw ideas and not be attached, it really creates not only a very safe environment, but it creates a lot of innovation and creativity, and really works towards creating high performing teams.
I agree. A few weeks ago, I was in Texas working with a company that builds fences in America. They have 7 locations. And I did 3 Zoom interviews, if you will, with certain different groups, and in a sense, getting everybody ready for what we were going to do for the strategic thinking session. And one of the things I spoke to the general manager and the president of the company who were there, and I said, look, you may hear some things you're not going to like. You got to be willing to open up and be ready for that and accept it. Just accept it. You don't have to criticize it. Yeah, no problem. It went great. Really great. There was such an honest communication. People were really being on, and it was a wonderful thing.
You know what it's like?
Go ahead.
Really good leaders actually do like to be challenged. Even CEOs, because they're so used to people saying yes. But when someone says no, and actually gives them the evidence to do that, it makes such a huge difference.
I absolutely agree. And you're right. Leaders have to be open and honest enough to say, hey, I made a mistake. I thought this was the right thing to do. Here's my reasoning, but what I'm finding out now is it's not the right thing to do. So that's okay. Now let's figure out how we're going to fix it. That's where you really start to bring people together. Let's define a pathway for the future.
Yeah.
I want to move on to the next question if I can. I think you'll enjoy this one. A number of years ago, I have to tell you, I refrained from speaking about mission statements. Okay? I'm sure you know what it was like. You ask people if they have a mission statement and they go, oh yeah, it's right over there. It's on the wall. Do you live by it? Do you breathe it? Do you do it every day? We walk by it. It's that sort of a response. So I said, I've had enough of this. Lately, I have returned to talking about mission statements. I have come with great fervor because I've come to understand how important it is. And because I speak a lot about the big 3 in terms of hiring, attracting, and retaining people, engaging them. The big three for me are, number one, people are searching for values alignment. And this is, as you say, as you have alluded to, so the outgrowth of the pandemic. People don't want to work for just a paycheck anymore. So they're looking for values alignment. The second thing is they want to be involved in the decision-making processes of the organization. They want to matter and they want their work to matter. They search for meaning. They search for a level of control and autonomy over their own lives. And the third thing is they want training and learning that enhances their professional and hopefully personal lives. What I was doing was I was talking about values alignment on one side of the model, if you will, or one side of the idea, being attracting people into your organization whose values align with the organization's. But one of the things I had not talked about, and hence my return to talking about mission statements, is that the organization itself has to have a way to demonstrate their own values, their own aligned values. So the two meet together. It's like building a bridge and starting from both sides of the river. You want to meet in the middle. I'd love to get your reflection on the importance of a mission statement and how it weighs into building trust.
Yeah, mission statements to me are really good in terms of really working towards clarity. And clarity is one of those things that if a leader isn't clear or not specifying what they're doing or the expectations or where they're going, people get confused, they get fearful, and most people want to please their boss, so they will pull back because it's too risky for them to do anything in case they make a mistake. So mission statements, provided that they really explain why the business is doing what it does and makes that clear in a way that people can do behaviors that are in alignment with that, it's very powerful. And it's really hard to inspire people if you don't have that as an anchor.
I agree completely. And for me, it's one sentence. You get one sentence. You can have some nice amplifying paragraphs after it, but it's got to be bold, it's got to be precise, it's got to be clean, and it's got to be direct.
Mm-hmm.
And people have got to be able to look at it and say, that's who we are. In fact, when I was doing this strategic thinking session, at the end of the session, the group that was there were 15 people in the room, said, let's work on the mission statement. And they cut words out of it. And when they were finished, the magic happened. And the magic was several people stood up and looked at the mission statement and said, that's who we are.
Yeah, it needs to really hit you. And when you read it, it should feel good and it should be motivating. That's when you've got a good one, is that if it makes you feel good.
It gives you focus, it gives you direction, and everybody can live by it. I call it the galvanizing. It's that thing that brings everybody together and says, this is where we're going. I want to ask you this question. I think we're orbiting around the same planets, as I like to say. In the first chapter of your book, which thank you for sending that along, by the way, you made mention of the changing nature of leadership in this post-pandemic world. The need to build trust and connect people who are on site in the brick and mortar places and those who choose to remain in the hybrid environment. In my opinion, the battle lines are drawn between organizations who want to have more control. For example, PricewaterhouseCoopers has now talked about having people return to the establishments, to the buildings. And of course, Amazon has made this declaration that we want to get everybody back into the house again, so to speak, and that they are going to do things so that they take away from the bureaucratic things that have gone on in the past and make it a lot more streamlined. And I can tell you that several of the guests that I've already talked to, we're all in the wait and see mode. How do you do this? I'm really curious to see how they do it. Anyway, so I see the battle lines, as this hierarchical perspective in one sense, and leadership much more as an influence relationship in this distributed network, if you will, of people in hybrid environment along with the people who have returned to work. I'd love to get your ideas and reflection on that.
This whole working from home thing has really been an experiment. So, and we're at a different stage now where we're going back to what was. But there is some clear research, and I think it was from PwC. They said that if people are working at least 50% in the office and at home, that seems to be the sweet spot. That was, I think, with their organization. Every organization is different. So I am not going to put my hat in the ring and say, this is the future and this is what's going to happen. I just think we just have to experiment and see what happens. There are pros and cons with both of them. I think working from home can be really helpful for people on certain, when they've got lots of kids to look after and all those sorts of things. And if they've got deep work that they need to focus on. This is something that we're going to have to work out, but I'm not going to say which is best or which is worse, or it's something that it's really relevant. It's what every organization has to work out that's best for them and their customers and what they're delivering.
I agree. I think it's a continuing experiment. And it may work for some companies and it may not work for other companies. For example, I live across the street from a huge financial data center and corporate workplace, brick and mortar, if you will. And with a parking lot the size of a football field's parking lot. Okay. Now, when I first got here, every spot in that parking lot was filled. And during the pandemic, you'd be lucky to find 10 cars in that parking lot because everything is distributed. So much so that the company, without naming names here, is selling the buildings. So, in effect, I think accepted the idea that they may, in the future at least, they may have a much more distributed network, if you will, or people in the hybrid environment and stick with that rather than trying to bring everybody back to the buildings. But I agree with you. It's a wait and see. I think it's going to be different for different organizations. It's going to be very curious. But for me, from the leadership perspective, I'm always interested in watching how two different ideas, this idea of more of a hierarchical perspective and more of a distributed leadership as an influence relationship perspective, how in fact they may work themselves out in the future. So my concentration, my curiosity more than anything else. I would like to ask you the last question as we get down to the end here, and that is now I can call it world famous question since it's been asked by people all around the world, and that is, if you had a magic wand and could change one thing in the area in which you work, what would that be and why did you choose that?
It would really be for leaders to consider how they are not building trust. So, and one of the issues is that we are biologically wired to look out at the world to see if we're safe and to make sure that there's nothing that's going to come out at us. But we're actually not designed to look within ourselves to see what we could potentially be doing to create trust issues with others. So when you have leaders who are very conscious about their impact, their words and their behaviors, and really work on that, it's quite magical. So the more leaders we have that are more self-aware and willing to listen to others and adapt their behavior and leadership style according to different situations, the better it will be for workplaces.
Very interesting. Yeah, I'd agree. I think that I've always vulnerability and it's such a big word. That vulnerability is very powerful. When you can stand up as a leader and say, I made a mistake. I just didn't get it right. And I'll tell you this interesting thing. Every time I've done that in the past, what I found so amazing was that people gathered around me and supported me. They would say, that's okay. We'll figure out a way to fix it. Don't worry. We'll get on with it. And I thought that was so encouraging. If you come as a human being and you say, yeah, I messed this up. I didn't get it right. In whatever strata, your people gather around you and support you and say, you're one of us. You made a mistake. We make mistakes. You're one of us. Marie Claire, thank you so very much for getting up so early in the morning in Australia. I so appreciate that. Thank you for a wonderful input and a great job here on the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. I am truly grateful. I wish you and everyone that comes in contact with you great success in the future. Thank you so very much.
My pleasure. Thanks, John.